my childhood trauma when I was 8 is actually progressed and manifested itself into a chronic health issue. So I firmly believe that 100% of our chronic issues come from psychosomatic basis. Yes, some of them can come from like genetic and predispositions and so on, but even genetic predispositions are kind of triggered by environment. That means that, traditional medical care, they can only care for symptoms really, but they cannot really provide a healing on a core level. So when in my experience, I brought healing, forgiveness, gratitude to this little 8-year-old Ana, somehow next day I woke up without any chronic issue. And of course I cannot promise that it's going to be every single person's experience, but I can tell that we have seen miracles happening after our retreats.
I am Steve Saporn, and this is the Neuro's Journey. This episode is for you if you build a life that looks great on paper, but privately, just something feels a little off or empty. The achievement keeps rolling in, but the feeling you thought it would bring never quite does, and you're ready to try something different. You're a founder or a leader who's starting to realize that the next level isn't about a better strategy or even working harder. It's about integrating the parts of yourself you were taught to shut down, your emotions, your vulnerability, and the fact that you have needs too. You're done with the version of strength you inherited, the one that's burning you out and leaving you feeling alone, often in a room full of people you love, and you're looking for the version that actually works. One where you're grounded enough that the people around you can thrive, but you're also not losing yourself in the process. Ana Kulygin is the founder and CEO of In Me Wellness, a global retreat leader, speaker, and plant medicine advocate. Ana bridges indigenous healing, psychedelics, with cutting-edge science and technology. She's Europe's premier psychedelic retreat provider and just recently spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Ana moves fluidly between the boardroom and transformational retreats, guiding founders and visionaries to reclaim the clarity and power they gave away to become who they were told to be. Whether she's facilitating a retreat in nature or speaking on an international stage, Ana's through line is clear. Sustainable leadership begins within. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Yeah, and so how we got here was I'm obviously pretty immersed in the psychedelic space, given Leah and the world that I run in. And I've always felt a call to ayahuasca, but never an actual call to actually do it. It seemed interesting and it seemed like something on my path. And I meet a lot of people who offer that kind of service. And after Leah met you in Davos last year, she had a lot of good things to say, and we met and kind of became friends. And just being around you, a few things landed on me. One, I just feel safe in my body around you. I feel a calmness, which is probably something you're radiating off or that I'm picking up on. And your approach to all of this seems like sort of the way that I roll, right? I always try to do research and understand what's happening and what I'm doing. But I also have a lot of space for things that don't have research behind them as much. And I'm actually more open to the indigenous wisdom and some of the older things now as I move further down the path. And I've traveled in Africa for a year with a bat. I've done a lot of stuff in jungles, being bit by mosquitoes and whatnot. And I like the fact that our retreat is going to be in Barcelona at a villa, but still have indigenous, leaders there to guide. So it just felt like this is the one for me. I'm going to be doing it in May of this year, so I'm really excited to have that experience with you. And it'll probably be a really open way to meet me in a completely different way that most people have not. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm really excited to see you after the experience. That's what brings me the most joy, is to look at people in the eye and see this, certain spark that is there after the retreat, the certain awareness that is seen in the eyes. So it really brings me a lot of joy to to witness that profound change in people. Yeah, but about myself, I'm coming from the corporate world, and back then I was looking for some answers. I felt certain void within, and I felt anxious and depressed, and felt like that I wasn't living my life. And then I had some chronic issues with my health, so I was looking for answers, and I came across psychedelics. And for this audience, I don't think I need to explain why psychedelics and how they work. I think there is a plethora of information online. There is so much science coming out now. There's so many people talk about it. So there is a reason why I did that. But in my exploration, I went through the wide range of experiences, from being bitten by mosquitoes in the jungle to going to the hippie lands of Ibiza, and to studying with scientists and doctors in the scientific kind of clinical settings. Mm-hmm. And with all of that, I decided that to bring something and kind of integrate all of these experiences in a beautiful format that is safe and secure and comfortable. So we do our retreats in the beautiful locations and kind of luxurious settings with the doctors and therapists on site. Psychedelic is a main component and central component of the experience, but then we also bring the technologies like state-of-the-art tech that increases neuroplasticity. We have a private chef and nutritionist. We combine different ancient modalities. We have therapeutic modalities like Gestalt therapy, like IFS, internal family system. There is a very, very in-depth preparation protocol and then integration protocol. So we do that in a small settings. We curate the ecosystem of participants too, because I believe each participant is a part of a set in the setting of the other participant. There is an influence that each participant has on each other. So it's always kind of like a beautiful constellation of participants that help each other to heal and improve. And it's a beautiful work. I really love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I clued into you seeing the change in people's eyes, and then reflecting on the name of your company, In Me. And I'm writing a book now, and sort of the theme of it is that a lot of kind of self-help or whatever is saying, well, do this, do that, add it on to you. And really, I think it's that we're stripping layers away of all the things that happened. And so my sense is that Gleam is somebody who's really seen more the truer version of themselves without all the conditioning that is just natural to the human life. And it's something that is beautiful. And I think that's why, beyond the neuroplasticity and science, you're starting to check into an identity that is like your true self. And then then you can operate from that identity without a lot of discipline. If you are truly a healthy person, then it's not hard to be healthy. Mm-hmm. If you're somebody who thinks they're unhealthy and is trying to become healthy, it's willpower. And for most of us, well, definitely, at least for me, it never works for that long. So, I'm super excited to do it. And you come, we have this similar connection. We come from finance. We have both changed and shifted gears, and I think you're right. It doesn't have to, you don't have to switch your life up to do this. But so how did you get from the hedge fund space to doing this? What's that path? Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, first of all, most of our participants don't really change their jobs that drastically. Mm-hmm. What does happen is that they find courage to change things that they need to change in order to align their lives in a direction of greater wellness. And then they are able to find acceptance for the things that they cannot or shouldn't change, like deep, true acceptance. So, and that's what happened to me, and that's a really beautiful thing. For me personally, my first experience was such a profound experience that divides my life into before and after, is because before coming to psychedelics, I had this chronic chronic bronchitis. I had a chronic issues with my health and autoimmune. I had depressive and anxious episodes, but mostly what was really kind of eating my soul alive is that I felt like I was living somebody else's life. Yes, I built a beautiful life, but somehow I felt like it wasn't my life, right? So I was looking for this sense of purpose, and I wanted to see if my life personally has purpose in it, or maybe life doesn't have any purpose, and I just wanted to accept it, right? And in this first experience, I healed my chronic issues with my health overnight. And what happened is that in the experience, I saw how my childhood trauma when I was 8 is actually kind of progressed and manifested itself into a chronic health issue. So I firmly believe that 100% of our chronic issues come from psychosomatic basis. Yes, some of them can come from like genetic and predispositions and so on, but even genetic predispositions are kind of triggered by environment, right? So that means that, you know, traditional medical care, they can only care for symptoms really, but they cannot really provide a healing on a core level. So when in my experience, I brought healing, forgiveness, gratitude to this little 8-year-old Ana, somehow next day I woke up without any chronic issue. And of course, I cannot promise that it's going to be every single person's experience, but I can tell that we have seen miracles happening after our retreats.
Wow, amazing. And I think that line that you said that you built a beautiful life, but it didn't feel like your life, is something that you hear over and over. That's said very eloquently, but by successful people who have from the outside what society says that we should have. And if you do feel a sense of emptiness or just that something isn't right with it, it can feel kind of that you don't want to express that because other people think, and are you saying like that, that everything that everyone's dreamed of isn't for you. So I think it, combines with what you said about the courage. I think just to say like, look, I've gotten what society says that I want, and I've decided to go a different direction or just incorporate it in a different way is really important. And I do think that psychedelics offer the opportunity for safe courage because you're in a setting, there are people watching you, you're safe, right? But going inside and dealing with the 8-year-old traumas and some of the things that I've sat with, that's scary. And at first, I was very nervous about doing those experiences. Now, it's more like a sense of adventure because I know that I'm safe, and they always, to me, just come out with positivity. Mm-hmm. Mostly what happens with me in my experiences is it seems like my higher self or my truer self narrates how I should be. Mm-hmm. And it's related to that period of life. And I had one where they recorded actually, not just notes, but they recorded my whole thing, and it was awesome. I really just went through Leah, the kids, work, like all of it, how I wanted to be and how I wanted to operate. And in my last experience, that's when I decided to propose to Leah. And, and that's been an incredible decision, and I feel so blessed that that's happened. And it would have happened without the psychedelic retreat. But it did give me a sense that like that's for me. That's what I want to do. It's really aligned with my, purpose. And it was sort of me talking about what I thought was interesting is I was sort of talking to myself and saying, what are you waiting for? Like, are you doing this test or is it this thing she has to do? And I kind of like talked myself through fear that was holding me back from making that decision. And then I came out on the other side and I said, no, that's what that's what I actually want to do. So it's been a total blessing. And I love to hear that there's miracles from your retreats. I get excited to see what happens.
Exactly, because it strips down kind of the masks that we wear, the stories that we tell ourselves, right? It's like how people report sometimes the ego death. It's not a real death. And the way I describe ego is just a collection of stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, there's a protector, there's like a side of you that tries to kind of like organize everything. That's also ego. But the collection of stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, it's kind of like our inner software. So psychedelics, in a way, is a way to reboot this inner software, right? It's to do the inventory, to go deep into our subconscious and do the inventory of those stories and see which stories are empowering and which stories are actually creating the tensions around ourselves in our relationships. So it strips down the masks. It's like, who are you without your job title? Who are you without your car? Who are you without, people around you? And then deep inside you, you go to this place within that is, you can call a higher self, and reconnect with that energy, and then make decisions from there. Right, and then you start aligning yourself in a way that is most authentic.
Interesting. And so when you were in that first retreat and you're, kind of connecting your childhood trauma and you're having that experience, did you in that retreat connect it to this is what's causing my chronic pain? Or did you just resolve that and wake up and your chronic pain is gone and then you're like, oh, that must have been what happened?
At that particular experience was with ayahuasca, mm-hmm. and people that work with this medicine, they know that this is a purgative medicine. Mm-hmm. And that means that there is a purge happens, and the purge can happen in many forms. Some people can start crying or laughing or sweating or shaking. That's how the trauma leaves their body, or it's possibility of vomiting also, and or going like on the toilet, right? So when I had that vision and the traumatic the experience, and then I brought in actually the sense of gratitude for this experience, because it helped me to become who I am now. So it was this deep sense of gratitude, even for the hardest moments in my life. And then when that happened, I remember distinctly that I needed to go and purge. And I purged out exactly the bronchitis that I had. Like, it was like, I always, when I was coughing, there was like this little bump, and like I literally purged out this bump.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So you sit with all these people, you see these, the experience of them changing. And so how would you characterize the miracles that you see or the change? Because you've said it, well, everybody's not shifting the external, the externalities of their life up as much as you and I have. So it might not look that different to their friends and family as far as all the things that are happening in their life. What do you see as the miracle for the guy that comes in there but doesn't change his job or his family or anything outward facing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, there was a whole range of different miracles that we see, and from somebody who had cancer, for example, and she didn't need to go through the operation after a few retreats with us.
Wow.
That's one thing. Another thing, there was a person whose child died due to suicide, and she was for 10 years in a really black hole, and then going through ups and downs, and then calling us after the retreat saying that for the first time ever, she feels like she doesn't need to rely on medication, and she feels like she's okay. That is a miracle to me. But the majority of our participants actually, they don't have a significant trauma. And I know that there is a lot of science that proves how psychedelics can be helpful for like resistant depression and anxiety and PTSD and all those things. Our participants mostly come to us as a mean of personal development, mm-hmm. right? And there is now science coming out on how, like, for example, psilocybin can improve longevity. Like there's a 50% increase in the lifespan of a cell after single use of psilocybin. There is a beautiful also ways to work with that medicine as a personal development tools. But these participants that come to us, and let's say, high achievers, high performers, they also carry their baggage. They have people that rely on them, they have projects, and sometimes they feel stuck with all of that, or they feel like they're creatively stuck, or there's something is going on in their life, like a divorce, but then they have a whole company with the 50 people that they need to run, and they don't have time for lengthy therapy and so on. So what happens, like what kind of miracles happen there is that they come out and with the solutions of, I don't know, either open new company, or how to communicate with their wife and their daughter, so they repair their relationship with the child that they kind of that feel like the relationship got strained, and they bonded together, and they go, like last participant, he was a CEO of a big company, but he felt like he completely lost in touch with his children. So he decided to go on vacations with every single one of them, and the whole kind of like communication, how he needed to communicate with them, came to him in the ceremony setting, and so he rebuilt the whole relationship with his children, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, amazing. From the deepest thing, from somebody's fear of their own death and mortality to the suicide of a child, that's got to be one of the hardest things anybody could deal with. And to be able to see that, I mean, that's got to be incredibly gratifying to be, that's my work, and that's what I help into the world. And then, yeah, I think it's really important that, I think they call it betterment of the well, right? You don't have to be spiraling out of control to get some benefit of this. A part of the life's journey is really just saying, I'm going to continue to spiral, hopefully upward, and more wise and kinder and more loving, and we can always use a little boost on that. So a lot of the people that we're talking about here are men, and what I focus on. So like men have this playbook, right? They were handed as kids: shut down, figure it out alone, stay in control. And I kind of feel like that's the setup for just a miserable life. You're stuffing in all of your feelings. So if you could write a new playbook for men who've had that conditioning told to us since we were little kids. I remember, I witnessed a mass murder when I was 6 years old, and I was in a car, and then I was walked into like a 7-Eleven after the whole thing had been done. It was random, it was just on the street, but I remember being 6 years old and walking from the car to the 7-Eleven and telling myself not to cry. And I'm 6, right? So there's this programming. Don't show weakness, shut it down, it's not manly, on a 6-year-old is already there. So I'm interested on your take and everything you've seen in your life experiences, how a new playbook would be helpful to men and how it would actually benefit their life.
Yeah. Well, men and women, right? It's there is a term of like kind of like toxic masculinity that goes around, that I don't really resonate that much, because it feels like it's putting a blame on men. I think there is a toxic system, and I think the main point here is that the level of consciousness and the level of awareness that was there in the system when we were brought up in that system, it was just very limited. And when there is a limited consciousness and limited awareness, like in most scriptures, they say two things: know thyself and open your heart, right? So know thyself is being aware of what is going on in this system. How am I reacting, how my nervous system operates, and how do I de-escalate and self-soothe, right? And in men and women, it's the same thing. In terms of masculinity and femininity, what we mean here is that the masculinity is the structure, the control, is the power, is the future direction. The femininity is more creativity and nurturing and care and all these beautiful things, which is, I feel like in the system that's quite toxic that we're coming out of, is that we're putting a little bit too much emphasis on this control structure, like shut down, like don't cry, right? And then a little bit of less emphasis, or like looking down upon on on creativity, on openness, on emotional aspects of ourselves. So to answer your question would be to integrate those aspects of ourselves, to find them within ourselves, right? The masculine and the feminine in each person, whether it's male or female, and then integrate them, and then we can become more sovereign.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we talked about this, you brought up Robert Greene and him marrying the masculine and feminine. And when I was reflecting on that, I was thinking that some men are going to hear the integrating the feminine and sort of instantly shut down, right? Because they've been told their whole life not to be something like that. So in curiosity, you laid out some of the things of the feminine, which are things that people just need. So they're really just aspects of ourself that men maybe have been told, especially with feminine. And I feel like in your world, you probably had to have a lot of masculine energy in the hedge fund world before, that you had to like kind of gin up, right? And I don't know that men have that experience where they go into a place and they're like, oh, I need to like cultivate my feminine energy to be here. I think there's more fear around it. So when you've worked with a lot of men, obviously, and you've seen these shifts, these miracles, what do you see? Are they more open to their feminine side kind of overtly, or do you just see it rise sort of naturally and it's more integrated in them?
Yeah, for these reasons, I don't like to put kind of like this sort of terminology of feminine and masculine, right? Because all these aspects are within ourselves in males and females.
Right.
What we do cultivate is the self-exploration, understanding the self, and then compassion and empathy, that like opening the heart, right? And the prescription for the solution, for the healing on the systematic level is the same. And the prescription is self-love and self-care. And that can be actually very alien for a lot of people. A lot of people, when we say that you need to really cultivate self-love, they don't know what you mean, right? And what does it mean to really deeply respect yourself? And then and that is huge, deep work. It's not just a phrase, and that requires to go deep in the psychic and see where do you judge yourself, where do you feel shame and blame, which parts of yourself do you shut down, right? Which parts of yourself you judge, whether it's a feminine or masculine, and then integrating those parts and seeing there is a wisdom in those parts. They're trying to tell you something, and then bringing forgiveness to those parts, and then finally coming together and be like, I love myself. I'm a good human being. The moments in my life that were hard, they were there to teach me something. I did my best, right? I did my best. I forgive myself. Thank you for everything that I've gone through. And then all of a sudden you come out of this experience and be like, wow, incredible. And then you show up differently in your world, in your relationships. You become more compassionate, empathetic leader. You become better father and husband. And that change is actually so profound, is more important than any company you can build. Because that change, that energy you can bring with your children, with your families, with your co-workers, is going to be felt throughout generations. Because the child that is not hurt by you being unconscious is going to grow up differently and going to treat their children differently.
Yeah, I love that. I got recently sort of more aligned with the concept of my lineage. I had a lot of that issue with my dad, and it felt like he didn't show love in the way that people consider loving. And deep down inside, I felt for a long time that I was just a bad person. And it was actually easier for me to forgive my sexual abuser than my dad, because it felt like he should have been doing these things for me. That dude was a predator, and it is what it is. But as I've started to come into forgiveness for him and sort of saying, well, he moved the ball forward. We were very poor. He got us to college educated. He wasn't that, and provided for me and did a lot of the things that his generation said were the things to do. And instead of rejecting him, which is really rejecting yourself, right? If you reject 50% of your parents, you're rejecting yourself. I sort of said, you did what you could do, and actually some of the reasons why I'm very dedicated to being a good dad is because of my experience with you. And we're all part of this lineage. And Apollo and Athena will push it forward, further than me. But I really do think that self-love is, it's kind of trite. They say you can only love somebody as much as you love yourself. But when you have the experience of especially realizing in sort of an instant, which is what I did, I was in a men's group and a guy brought it out of me that like my whole life I felt like a bad person. Even though if you looked at the outside, I looked like a pretty good person. That's really when things began to shift for me. And it wasn't instant. That wasn't a psychedelic experience. I mean, it's been years of kind of working with that and continuing to work with it. But I do think it's a beautiful thing to offer. I mean, if you're talking about being a father and what that really means, I mean, like, yeah, you can leave them a multi-family unit or something and some money. But if you can leave them this is the thing that keep them through any circumstance, whether it's overtly positive or negative. So this is the important stuff. And so there's another thing that we talked about that I thought was interesting. You brought up in our pre-interview something about in indigenous relationships, the orientation is about committing to like what the people are becoming, as opposed to who they are in a fixed state, which I think is brilliant. And there's a difference between, I think men hear that a lot of times, they feel like women are trying to change them. That's, I think dedicated to becoming is really like shine your light the brightest. And I want to, I see that light and I could see it getting bigger and bigger. But I just wonder how that concept, since you brought it up, has played out in your life and your thoughts on it.
Oh yeah, indigenous, there is so much wisdom and knowledge that the indigenous have that I wasn't aware of. Like before working with indigenous people, I thought that there's some sort of people with some feathers in their hair, and they're kind of just like the jungle people, and we are so more superior with our knowledge, information, and AI and robotics, whatever it is.
Right.
But there is actually a profound wisdom that they hold, and I call them wisdom keepers, of how to live in harmony with nature, how to live in harmony with everything around us. Like for example, Native Americans, or in the Mexico, natives of Mexico, they say Matuko Yasin, which is for all of our relations, right? So there's a relation that we have, and everything is related. We are related. Everything is related to each other. There is no separation between the observer and the observed. We are influencing each other constantly. So, there is no concept of ownership. Like there's no kind of natural resources that we own. That's completely alien to them, because we don't own the land, for example. We're the stewards of the land. And the same goes for the relationships. I don't own my wife, I don't own my husband, and a lot of the time in our tradition we kind of get married with the hope that we're marrying to this person and now to this version of that person. But we change. Everything around us changes. So what in their concept is that we are marrying to the evolution of the soul of that person. And in this way, we're there as a partners and shining the light on certain aspects of each other and being the cheerleaders and supporters and guardians of each other's well-being.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. I was reflecting on it with Leah, and we didn't have quite that phrasing, but we did sort of say like our relationship has a purpose, and the purpose is to accentuate the other person shining their light as brightly as they can in the world. And I think both of us, I know both of us feel that in the 3 years that we've known each other, there's been major transformation, and we are much more willing to shine our light into the world. And I think that is a beautiful thing. And it's so, to me, to have a partner that you're in it with in that way, is just such a blessing, right? And so, a very successful person and now in multiple spheres, right? You're the kind of woman that I think a lot of men would be attracted to and want in their life. But you don't really need a man, right? You're self-sufficient and all of that. So like, what makes you choose a partner? And, if there's a man out there who's saying, maybe he's not in partnership and he wants to draw in a real ally, how do you perceive that he shows up to the right person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first of all, the term need, like, yeah, of course, I don't need from the place of kind of the neediness, right? I think we do need to do our personal work before we come to a partnership as much as possible. Like really understanding ourselves, knowing how to regulate our own nervous systems, build our life so that we are sovereign within. But then there is a lot of work that can be done in a partnership. And from that perspective, I do need a man. There is a certain mirror work that can happen in certain personal growth that can happen only in a relationship. It's impossible to do this inner growth outside of the relationship, because there are certain aspects of ourselves that we cannot see unless there is somebody's mirroring us, right? And when we are in a partnership, we go very deep very quickly. Right? We're together, we're living together, we see each other, we're like, sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're stressed, sometimes we're happy, and all of these aspects are being mirrored back. And with this mirroring back, if it's a conscious couple, then it's a beautiful work that can be done, that can improve each other, we can improve each other and hold each other accountable in many ways.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It makes a lot of sense because you hear this thing, be the man that would attract the woman that you want to be. And it seems like there's a step-by-step process, really, because there's things that you can only do single and things you can only do in partnership. And it seems like the first step is the ones, alone. So you can cultivate yourself enough to be able to really be that person, which is really, I think, at the base of it, you said it, is regulating your nervous system enough to be at choice. Yeah, and it is a beautiful thing, and it makes it so then in any stage you're in, you can learn a lot from that particular experience. And so in our work, before you said safety is the first condition for transformation. And, I think that's definitely true in retreats, but, beyond that, in everything, in relationships and business and parenting. And I think when, a lot of men hear safety, they think like a lock on the door. So how would you characterize safety in the way that you're really talking about it?
Exactly. I think we can grow and change and transform only as much as our nervous system allows. That means that our nervous system needs to be feeling safe in order to be able to do this growth, in order to be able to go deep, right? And in me, wellness, the safety means, and security means that the person goes through the medical screening, that there is a highly curated group of participants in a small setting. There is a therapist on site. There is a personal relationship that happens and is developed prior to you coming to the retreat. It's a beautiful surrounding and environment. If for the person is before they go into this deep experience, to feel like I'm in good hands, I'm around good people, I trust them, I'm safe, right? And then when the nervous system is relaxed like that, then this inner kind of controller and protector can step away a little bit and for the medicine to go deeper. And then when we actually work with quite large doses, and of course we modify the dose for each participant, but we encourage people to go deep. And if the person feels safe, then their system can allow to go deep without any kind of like rocking the boat in a way. Because when the person feels like a little bit kind of, I'm not sure about this and that, then if I'm in the right place, then the inner protector starts blocking the experience, and then the person starts fighting the experience, and it's a really hard thing to fight a psychedelic experience, and it can go into this, the uncomfortable situations when you hear about the bad trip and so on. You can completely eliminate that risk by feeling safe in the environment.
And it's interesting, I think when you say those things, the calm nervous system and all that is safety. To me, what what I really hear, I think some people think you do this work and you're just going to be calm all the time. I think really what it is that your nervous system has resilience. So you would not want your nervous system to be calm all the time. That would be terrible for you. Mm-hmm. So you want it to engage, but then I think the safety comes in knowing that over and over it returns back to a state that is more calm, based on the circumstances. And so you would not want your fear instinct to disappear. You'd walk into the street and be killed pretty quickly, And I think that's kind of a misconception. I don't think like people who are on the spiritual path, or at least when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, I ought to be like calm all the time. That would be awesome. And now that I'm more in it, it's more like my ability to be dealing with the circumstances as they are. And some circumstances are threatening. We're driving up to the mountains tonight. Some of those drives, not tonight, but in a blizzard, that's a threatening circumstance. I need my nervous system engaged for 2 hours during that drive. I don't want to be relaxed, honestly. So that's an interesting thing. And I think it's, so you said you can completely eliminate the bad trip thing, and that's my experience. I've never seen somebody in a well-curated thing have a bad trip, and I've never had anything like that. Have you had people where you had to work with them in the moment? Because even with everything you set up, it's getting difficult for them. And really, is difficult bad?
Exactly, that's the difference. We can eliminate the bad trip, but it doesn't mean that everybody will have a blissful experience. There could be difficult moments of that experience. So the difficulty of processing something that's a difficult emotion, for example, right? So something arising from the subconscious level that needs to be processed, and with the proper professionals and therapists and somebody who you can trust, that person can help you, guide you through this experience. And then also there are different tools that are introduced prior to you going into the experience that can help person to self-soothe, which are actually helpful in life too, right? So for example, breath work, or meditation, or relaxation, or affirmation, all these different tools that we train people before they go into the ceremonial experience. Those tools are very helpful actually in life as well.
So you're giving them tools specific to if something is coming up, and really it's not to avoid the difficult thing, it's just to acknowledge that what's coming up is for me, right? It's not bad, it's just it's surfacing, and some things are difficult that come up, but the release you feel, I know that I've worked through some really intense things, and like you said, there is just an incredible shift. And that doesn't mean that I never had to engage with them again. There was just a shift, and it then made it easier for me to engage. And, with certain kinds of abuse and whatnot, things that were buried just from my psychology for most of my life, to then having them arise, to feeling like a forgiveness for that person. But then still sort of seeing over years, I still have some remnants of that interaction, not like you talking about healed chronic pain that was so obvious. With things like that, you're starting to see 4 months later, oh, I think there's something leaking in, but then there's not so much fear. Oh, okay, I'll go back and work with that again, and it's this continuing thing. So I think the interactions between psychedelics, I often say this, maybe if you're on this path, at least for me, 4 or 5 days a year that I might actually be doing this. And so there's another 360 days to live. And it's really the insights that I gain in those experiences that help me to live in those days. And I think they help me to be more engaged with those practices. You know, especially meditation, given the world we live in with the phones and the way they affect our brain, it's a free thing that we can do that is proven with thousands of studies to change your brain. And so that's something that I think some people are uncomfortable sitting with their own thoughts. And so going through a psychedelic retreat can give them sort of that courage, or just the knowing that, I can, you know, even if something comes up that's a little hard, I can sit with it, and then they can develop a practice that actually serves them instead of, you know, a constant avoiding, which is really what my life was before this work. When I really looked at it, I just pinged from avoidance strategy all day. Work, you know, substances, sex, you know, whatever it was just a thing to not be in the present moment. And I still do some of that for sure, you know, but I also kind of have more awareness of it. And I do think that psychedelics are helpful when you have these big experiences to bring it into the real life. And so, you know, we talked a lot about sort of what you do ahead of time and preparing and all that. And we're kind of leading into the integration. So when someone has this experience and all these realizations, how do you work with them after so that those things become behavioral change that they're looking for?
Yeah, first of all, to your point also that, you know, psychedelic is not a magical pill. Sometimes it can happen, just like in my case, in certain situations that you like all of a sudden the problem evaporates. But most of the time you need integration. And the integration is basically it's a life path. And healing is not a linear thing, it's a cyclical. Sometimes we feel like, okay, I feel like I've healed this part of me, or why am I being triggered again? But then you come to that point, but you're in a different point. You all of a sudden, the distance between action and reaction becomes smaller, the trigger and you reacting to it, and you kind of like have a little bit more of a way of kind of self-soothe yourself in the moment. And rather than being like in rage or something for 4 days, how you used to do, you all of a sudden in 1 hour you're okay, right? So the trigger is still there. And I like to say that every single trigger is a blessing. It's an opportunity for us to go deeper and see where the trigger lies and what happens, and bring understanding, forgiveness there, because the situation can be same, but the reaction of people can be completely different to the same situation. So it's not about the situation, it's about your reaction to it. So going deeper, understanding the reaction, and be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Bringing some kind of like spaciousness to the situation. But with the, you know, to your point, with our retreats, is that we use psychedelic, which is kind of the core modality, but it's not the only modality. So we use psychedelic in a way to increase the neuroplasticity of the person, which is the person's ability to learn new things and acquire kind of new knowledge and behavioral skills, to then introduce these different tools and practices that can then stick in the long term, right? So for example, meditation, for some people it can be hard because they don't want to, like, it's really difficult to sit 15 minutes with their own thoughts. But after the retreat, all of a sudden it becomes a daily routine, and it's fine, it's not a problem anymore. Or they wanted to quit certain addictive behavior, and they've been struggling with that, but then all of a sudden after this retreat, they just drop it, right? So as the neuroplasticity is increased in the first days, there is like a prescription that we give people so that they can direct their lives in a greater wellness. But then also after a couple of weeks, and then after 2 weeks, they feel like they've implemented all these tools and they're in a way becoming a new person.
Yeah, that actually happened with alcohol with me. I haven't drank for nearly 4 years now. But in the years prior to that, say 3 years before that, I was I quit for 18 months and then I started again and I, quit again for 9 months and this sort of back and forth thing. And it was really, I was, I knew it wasn't serving me, but there was something about it where I was still identified with it enough that it was willpower at some point, or it was, I kind of deep down inside knew I was always going to go back vibe. And I had a psychedelic experience and it wasn't really overtly like, you should quit drinking, that kind of thing. But just something shifted in me where it just, when I saw it, it just was like, my mind is like, that's just not for me. It's just not, it's just like the same way there's all kinds of things. Like I'm not doing heroin. I'm not like using willpower not to do heroin. Of course, people aren't doing it in front of me all day, but there are these shifts that just sort of happen. And I think what's awesome with psychedelics, and really I think it's like an identity change, that is like, I'm just not the person doing that. So it's not hard to stop. And I think certainly for people that are actively dealing with an addiction, it's really good to kind of focus on that and see whether that's you. So, I would imagine you have a lot of people who talk with you about this and are sort of interested in the thing, but they're not really ready to fly to Barcelona and do ayahuasca or psilocybin or something. So when somebody is kind of presenting themselves as they're in this phase of, I'm starting to reflect on my life, I'm starting to see that things aren't exactly how I want them, I don't know what move I'm going to make, do you have any sort of recommendations to get the ball rolling? Because I'm assuming you don't think that psychedelics are the path for everybody, right? There's many people that don't go that way. But I know I get presented with a lot of people talking to me about these things, and I'm wondering your take on that, on how you guide people in that.
Well, first of all, if this path is for you or not, some people, there are contraindications with psychedelics, so, take it with caution, make sure that there is a medical screening that happens, so you ensure that it's safe for you to participate. But then if that's kind of like in the books for you and you're contemplating, then how much longer do you want to wait until you improve your life? Well, what's the point of waiting? The government is kind of now opening up the doors a lot. We have a fully legal organization in the Netherlands and also in Spain, so it's completely legal. So what's the point of waiting?
And then if somebody said, well, I want to start on the path, but I don't want to commit to psychedelics, do you have anything that just sort of gets them kind of moving, towards that, or whichever way they go? If I was just saying, like, what do I do? And I'm like kind of scared to do psychedelics, but something's wrong. Would you have any standard thing that you would tell people? Yeah.
Well, first of all, suffering is needed until it's not needed anymore. Suffering is the kind of knock on the door, like, of awakening. It's an awakening process. So recognizing that first. And then, I always say that meditation, out of all the tools that exist out there, all the tools, the wisdom, the teachers, the gurus, the plant medicines, meditation will always come up on the top. But meditation has to be done consistently every single day for it to have a profound effect on the person. So start with mindfulness practices, meditation, 5-15 minutes a day. Start with breath work, like do the self-inquiry, read the books, all those things. But meditation, I would say, number one.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And I think, I'm just thinking about this, and I've never actually used this before, but those people are becoming curious. They're starting, they're reaching out to you, and maybe in a way they wouldn't have before. They would have met you and heard your story and never said anything. And I think maybe just encouraging that, like, okay, this is part of it. Like, you're the leader of your program. And so be curious and tap into yourself, what resonates. I do think the meditation for me, and I meditate often. I meditated today before this thing. We meditated, together beforehand. It is just an amazing tool that's free. And, I think that people think like even 50, you can start with 2 minutes. It's really about creating like the neural pathways that say that you do it, and then you get to 2 minutes. At some point, it'll be 5, and you don't have to push yourself past where you want to be. Just do it a little bit and start the path and start to identify with this is something I do for my own benefit, and then it becomes a part of your identity, and then you do it.
And if psychedelics is kind of something that is, you're exploring potentially doing, then just pick up the phone, call us, go on our website, www.inmewellness.com. We can set up a call with one of our facilitators and practitioners and then answer any of your questions so you can see if this is really for you or not.
Yeah, I think that I obviously knew you kind of before, but we went through the process, and I'm pretty experienced with it, so I also know what is kind of the right things to do. And my experience of not having done the retreat yet, but to this point, is that you do it right, and there is a level of safety that we talked about that starts the process off right. And I think that people often say in psychedelics, when you decide to do the journey, that's when it starts, right? So there is a process of making the decision, and you can get on a call with somebody and decide it's not right for me now. But if you feel it and then you make the decision, things are happening. And we had those calls in, I think, December, and the retreats in May. So this is like percolating in me over time, and now I'm starting to engage with the therapist and the doctors and all the different things you do, and that continues this process. And I think that's really important. It's not just prep, it's to tell your mind that this is not an event. The medicine is a 1 or 2 day thing, but this is a process that hopefully lasts through your whole life. And I also just think that we talked about healing and healed so much in this thing, but I really oriented around, because I had this really challenging somatic experience in my body that I was avoiding all the time. So what I was doing was just, can I get rid of this feeling, which I thought was going to be an experience that it would just be, okay, well then I would be Steve and I wouldn't have these feelings and life would be great, and I would be somewhere like a beautiful, like Garden of Eden with a waterfall, and I would be healed, and that would be the end. And really what I've just found is and what is beautiful about it is there's always more. It would suck if it was over. I mean, then what would you do? Like, what would be the benefit of life? So, yeah, I think that at least my experience of you and the way that you run things to this point is the way to do it. We'll put in the show notes and all the things, the way to get in touch with you. Anybody can just reach out to me. I'm happy if someone wants to DM me and just wants to talk about my experience, and especially once it's over too. I've dedicated my life to being of service in some way, and I think that the way that I'm trying to do it is have experiences and be open and vulnerable about it. And honestly, if the experience is bad, I will tell people too. So, well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you flying out here to make this happen. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close?
Yeah, there is something I want to say. I met this incredible person. Her name is Dr. Susan Miller. She recently wrote a book. It's called The Awakened Mind, and she's a PhD in Columbia University. And is just a really incredible person, and her work is all surrounded spirituality. And basically there is a whole science now that proves that a person who is more spiritual, they're less prone to anxiety and depression. There is less suicidal ideations with people that are more spiritual. So in psychedelic world in the scientific world of psychedelics, they don't really talk about spirituality that much, but psychedelic experience is a spiritual experience. Anybody who's done it, they can confirm that. Mm-hmm. And that there is a healing that happens when you all of a sudden reconnected with this spiritual parts, whatever your religion is, it doesn't matter, and whether you're religious or not, you are a spiritual being.
Mm-hmm.
So reconnect with that part, and I'm kind of like a little bit hesitant of saying God these days, because I feel like it's the most misunderstood word, and I kind of like risk to be misunderstood. But whatever this, God, universe, nature, whatever the name for it, do reconnect with that spiritual practice and have spiritual practices in your life, and it will definitely make a difference in your life.
Awesome. That's an awesome note. I'm going to listen to that book on the way up to the mountains tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining the Neuro's Journey podcast. If this episode landed, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The real medicine is in the connection, and this community only grows when we reach for each other. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. And if you have a minute, leaving a rating really helps more people find this work. And keep showing up for your own journey. Every small act of courage matters, for you, for the people around you, and for all of us. I am so grateful to be walking this path with you.